If you've ever seen animations like this, or this, or this, and thought, hey, I want to make something like that, well, now you actually can. It's all thanks to a tool called Hana, which is made by the team behind Spline. And if you've never heard of Spline, where have you been? I'm kidding. Mostly. Spline is a super cool 3D tool that runs directly in your browser. But Hana? Well, Hana is their new animation tool for 2D stuff. It's also browser-based, also super fun. In this video, I'll walk you through making something simple like this animated icon, and then we'll level up and build a more advanced interactive scene like this. It's all beginner-friendly, totally non-scary, so let's get started. This video is brought to you by Envato, the unlimited creative subscription. Find and download high-quality 3D renders, models, and templates. Follow the link in the description and start creating now. Let me just start by saying that if you want to learn Spline, the 3D stuff, we have a dedicated course about that on the Envato Tuts Plus YouTube channel. Just check out the link in the video description. Now, let's get back to Hana. Step number one is to open Spline. You can do that directly in your browser, or you can download these standalone apps for Windows or Mac OS. I'll be using the app. You can use whatever you want. You go to spline.design or spline.com, create an account, log in, and you'll be taken to the app. Now, once you're inside the app, go and click the blue button that says Create. You can create a 3D design that's using the Spline core 3D stuff. And you can also select Hana 2D design. Let's do that. The UI here is pretty simple. If you've ever used Figma or similar software, then this will look very familiar. You have a layers panel, a toolbar, and a properties panel. For now, you can create rectangles, ellipses, text, and vectors within Hana. And it's really simple. You select the tool, click and drag, and then you can change the size of the object from here. You can change a couple of its properties from here, and we'll be exploring these as we go along. Now, let's actually create something with Hana. Let's make an icon, an animated icon, and one that's pretty simple to make, but demonstrates a lot of Hana's strengths is a cog icon or a settings icon. So let's start by drawing a circle. Click, drag, hold down Shift to lock in the width and the height. Width, height don't really matter right now. Then let's draw a rectangle like so. Let's change the color from here so we can see a little bit better. And let's add some rounded corners, something like that, maybe a little bit more, something like 20 pixels. Then select both of these, use the panel on the right to align their centers, and then grab the rectangle, duplicate it with either Control or Command D, and then rotate it while holding down Shift to rotate in increments of 15 degrees. So rotate that to, let's say, 45 degrees. Let's Control or Command D again, rotate that to 120, and I actually made a mistake. I need to rotate this another 15 degrees. So you rotate at 60 degrees and 120 degrees. Cool. So now if you take all of these, the 4 layers, and you go to the inspector, you can see something called Boolean modifier. This allows you to combine shapes. So we click this first one and we have a cog icon, but we need a cutout in the center. So let's grab the circle tool. Let's draw that cutout, just the exact size that we want. Something like this looks pretty good to me. Select both, make sure we align them properly. But now I'm going to select the second option here, to subtract. This will basically cut the shape that was on top from the shape that was below. And this creates some Boolean groups here in the layer panel. You can see that if I drag this ellipse around, it completely changes the shape. So this is non-destructive. Cool. Now let's give this a nice color. Let's say something like an orange, a bright orange. And let's animate it. But in order to animate it properly and be able to later load it in some HTML project, we need to place this inside a frame. So let's grab the frame tool, or F, and let's draw a frame to something like this. And we can make this pretty much any size we want. Let's make it, let's say 200 by 200. And now let's also bring down the shape, and let's fit it inside this frame, just like that. And let's change the frame background to white. Let's make this icon just a little bit smaller, and let's align it in the middle of this frame. Now, notice how my icon changed a little bit. The cog teeth are not as defined as they were before. They're now kind of rounded, and I don't want that. That's happening because when I made the whole thing smaller, the radius of these rectangles actually stayed the same, 20 pixels, right? You know, we can get around that by just resetting this to 0 and then selecting the entire Boolean, which, you know, we can rename to icon and set a corner radius there to exactly what we want. Let's say about 8 pixels will work for me. Let's make this a little bit more interesting, and let's add a drop shadow. So I'll go to Effects, click on the plus, select Drop Shadow, and I'm actually going to select the same color for the drop shadow, but I'm going to make it 20% opacity. I'm going to set the offset to 4 on the X, 4 on the Y, and I'm going to reset the blur to 0. And you know what? Actually, let's increase those values to 10, and let's increase the shadow to about 30%, or maybe a bit less, 24%. So that's how our icon currently looks like. Hana is still in its infancy, so yeah, you gotta be a little patient with it. Sometimes it does weird zoom things like that. Okay, so let's animate this icon, because currently if we click on the play button inside the frame, it does nothing. The way animation works in Hana and in Spline for that matter is by creating states. So we select the element, and in the inspector we see states. We click here and we have a base state. That's where we started, and we have a new state. Now this new state, I can do whatever I want. I can change the fill color. I can rotate it, let's say 40 degrees, right? I can change its position. Now we have two states for this element. The base state, this is where we started, and the other state. In order to animate between these two states, we add an event. We click here and we say, okay, what event do we want? Let's go with start. This will trigger exactly when the animation or the element loads. So what action do we want to perform along with this event? Let's click on transition. So transition will basically target the icon, our element, and we'll go from the current state to the other state, right? So from state 1 to state 2. And we can change the animation parameters in here. We can change the duration, the easing. Let's change this to a spring animation, for instance. And we can also make it loop, right? We can make it loop like, let's say 3 times, and let's see how it looks like. Or we can make it loop indefinitely by selecting infinite here. But let's actually turn this into a much smoother animation. So I can remove that state and that event, and let's start fresh. So click on state. I want to do 2 things here. I want to rotate this to 180 degrees on the second state, and I want to move it 20 pixels on the X, 20 pixels on the Y. That's it. Very simple. No other effects. Let's go back to the base state. Let's add an event. On start, I'm going to transition between the current state and the second state. I'm going to use spring, and I'm going to loop it infinitely. Okay, so now click play. And it works. But once it gets to the bottom, so once it finishes the animation, I want it to go in reverse. We can do that by, again, selecting the transition, going to spring, and then going to cycle and choosing ping pong. So that will do this. I'm quite happy with my icon. It's a very simple animation. You can, of course, animate a lot of different properties like the color, the size, the position. But as a starter example, this is more than enough. Now, what can you do with this? Well, you can select the frame, you can click on these three dots, and you can click export. And here you have two options. You can either share a link to this animation with someone else, and this is going to open in the browser, or you can copy an embed code for, HTML projects and stuff. Alternatively, you can export this whole thing as an image, either as a PNG or a JPEG, and you can change the ratio or how big the image should be. You can choose to hide or show the background image, and you can download that for use in Figma or other software if you want to place this as a raster image. But let's go back to this embed link. So you have a couple of options here. By default, any Spline or Hana embed will display a logo unless you're on a paid plan. So if you choose no here, it's going to ask you to upgrade to a plan. But you can also deactivate the page scroll. So that's going to remove the scroll bars from the embed element. And you can also hide the background color. You also have some options for the frame size. Contain, cover, actual, responsive. I won't really go into these right now. But once you make any kind of change here, you click on export. That's going to save the changes. And then you can just copy that embed code. So what can you do with it? Well, if you have an HTML project, you want to use that icon in, you can do that. Let me show you in a CodePen. So all I need to do is paste in that embed code in my HTML, and that's going to load it directly in my page, and the animation is playing. All is well, except for this watermark, which can be removed if you're on a paid plan. And this iframe can be changed. If you want to make it smaller, you can set the width there in code to 50%. That's not going to change the size of the actual icon, but the size of the frame itself. If you want to change the size of the icon, you need to go back to Hana and change it from here. So that's basically how you load it in HTML. If you're using a visual builder, let's say Framer, you can load it there as well. So here I am in Framer, and we need to go to Insert, Utility, and then you select Embed. And with the embed selected, you would go in the Properties panel here, select HTML, paste in that embed code, press Enter, and that's going to load that icon directly and play it automatically for you. That's super, super cool. And you can also resize it. Of course, this would be super cool if we didn't have that nasty watermark, but that can be easily solved. And as far as I know, you can also do that in Webflow if that's what you're using. But Framer is actually pretty cool because it automatically plays that animation directly in your working space without having to preview that page. Now, what if we have a hero section that looks something like this, but we want to add some cool stuff some animated stuff in the background. Well, we can do that with Hana as well. Let me show you. Let's go back to Spline, and in here, I'm going to change the zoom level to 100%, and I'm going to grab the frame tool, click and drag, and I'm going to create a frame that's 1000 by 1000. All right, select the frame, change the color to white, and let's start by drawing some lines. So I'll grab the rectangle tool, and I'll draw a line that's, let's say, about 24 by 2, 24 by 1. Yeah, I think that works pretty well. Let's change the opacity here, or let's actually change it to a very light color, something like that. So it's, barely visible there, maybe a little bit darker. Now, here's something else you can do in Spline. You can select any kind of element. You can add an event and set it to look at. I'm going to have it look at my cursor, and I want it to change its X direction. I'm just going to set the view reset to no reset, and let's test it. And you can see that when I move my mouse cursor, that line automatically follows it. Really cool. Now, I wonder how it would look like if this entire section was filled with these tiny lines that would follow my cursor. So let's find out. Let's duplicate this, and let's move it down 100 pixels, and let's duplicate it. And now let's select these two, duplicate, and let's move them down. I want to create like a grid of these. Select all 4, duplicate, move them down. This would be so much easier in the Spline 3D tool because we have a clone tool or a cloning tool there. Unfortunately, we do not have that here. So that's the first row, or the first column, I should say. We can select all of these, group selection, and then I can duplicate the group. And I'm going to move this group to the side 100 pixels. And now select both groups, duplicate those. And now select all 4 groups, duplicate those. It's kind of a laborious task, but we got there in the end. Cool. So now I have all of these groups here. I don't really need them to be inside groups anymore, so I can right-click and ungroup all of them. So now if we preview this frame and I move my mouse cursor, yeah, all of the elements, all of those lines are following it because I made copies of this initial one which had the follow event. But we don't have to stop here. We can actually add another interaction. Let's create an ellipse tool, or an ellipse, I should say. That's about this big. And I'm going to give it a nice bluish, kind of greenish color, something like that. Very bright. And I'm also going to add a blur to it. So click on plus, select layer blur, and let's just bump this up really high, something like 80 for the blur. And I'm also going to reduce the opacity of that color to maybe 50 or 60%, something like that. Now, we can select this. We go to Events, Plus, and we can select Follow. What do we follow? We follow the cursor on the X and on the Y axis. And I'm also going to select No Reset here. And that looks something like this. Now, that blue blob kind of follows my cursor. And I can play around with the animation. I can, maybe decrease the speed. And I can add some damping. And damping is like lag, basically. So now you'll see that well, actually you won't. Follow, damping. Let's increase this. Let's make it 20. Preview. Okay, there we go. So now the little blue cloud kind of lags behind the cursor a little bit. That's a pretty cool effect. let's load this in our web page. So I'll select the frame. Alternatively, I can click export, and then I can click on the settings here. I would like to avoid the page scroll, background color, and I'm going to choose frame size. I'm going to set it to cover, and cover will basically make it expand to fill the entire available space. Click export again to update my embed. Copy that embed code. And let me just go back to CodePen, and I'm going to paste in that iframe right here. And it currently looks like this. Right? We can still select the text on top of it. We can still interact with the button. But as soon as our cursor is released to the background, we get the same kind of animation in an HTML page. Now, if you're curious as to the CSS code that makes this work, well, I have a container that houses the Hana animation and the text content. The text content is placed in its own div, and then we have the iframe, that's the embed code. In terms of CSS, I have the container set to position relative. The iframe, so the embed, the animation, is set to position absolute, and it has a z-index of 0, so it sits under the content. And then the content itself has a z-index of 1, and the rest doesn't really matter. Essentially, I'm positioning the animation absolutely under the actual content of this section. All right, and that's about it for this introduction video to Hana. Obviously, you can do a lot more with it. I just showed you a couple of basic things just to give you a taste of its capabilities. But if you remember those demos, those animations that I showed you at the start of this video, well, those will kind of describe a lot better what Hana can do. Those were made by the team behind Hana. Hana is still in its infancy. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of its bigger brother, Spline, but you know, it's on the right track. It's only been out like a week at the time of this recording, so I'm sure the team will add more and more features to it, and will keep updating it, making it more polished, more powerful. But right from the start, you know, you can create a lot of cool things. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this was a useful video. Go check out the other videos on the Envato Tuts Plus channel. You'll find lots of stuff about web design, web development, and a lot more. It's all free, so make sure to hit that like button if you like this video, and subscribe for more content like this. I'm Adi, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.